Hey everyone, welcome back to the FrSkyStve channel. This is episode 5. We are talking about setting up rates in Expo on this Down and Dirty series. We're setting up on this plane you're looking at right now. This is the E-flite Mall. Let's get right into setting up rates in Expo. So we are talking about rates in Expo. Every once in a while I'll be at the flying field, and after a while I've gotten a lot better at recognizing issues like when elevators are too jumpy, or especially when people are making turns and I see that the plane is struggling to make smooth turns. It's kind of very jittery in the sky. Every, Sometimes I say, may I help you? May I see your transmitter? I will physically go in and I'll say, listen, I'm going to change something on your transmitter. If you don't like it, I'll change it back. And oftentimes what I do is I set up Expo, and people get it and they're like, oh my gosh, this is so great. What did you do? And sometimes people don't understand what rates in Expo do, and there's a lot of people who do understand what rates in Expo do. But the situation is that they look at this and they say, well, rates in Expo would probably be somewhere in models, so I hit this. And they look on this list and they say, well, I don't see it here. Go to the next page. I don't see it here either. Where is rates in Expo? And what happens with FrSky in Ethos is we moved rates in Expo into each control surface. So each control surface, in ailerons, we set rates in Expo. In elevators, we set rates in Expo. In rudder, we set rates in Expo. And this is different than what we typically do. Like, for example, we're looking at right here a really weird looking curve where all of a sudden you're seeing that it's not going all the way to 100% in all the directions, and you see kind of a really flat curve in the middle. And that's what something that's set up with rates in Expo does. So we go inside of here, and long press we can get in here, and you can see I've already set up rates in Expo. And what I've done is, I'm going to have to take you back to show this to you. We go into the dock right here, and we can see that I have set up high rates on. So manual is a SB up. So I'm using switch B. Switch B up is manual, which means that there's no rates, no Expo. Everything's at 100%. And then you have high rates, and then you have low rates. So why would you use high rates? And when would you use low rates? Well, high rates is when you're going slow. So when are the times you're most likely to fly slow? Typically when you're taking off and when you're landing. As you're taking off, you're starting to gain altitude. And every once in a while, someone will veer into your course as you're taking off, and you need to move away from them quickly. So you want as much control as possible. Though your plane is flying slow, you need more control in order to avert disaster. And what happens is you start to fly and you go faster, that extra control makes things a bit more jittery. It's the plane becomes a bit more sporadic in the air, and if you turn the rates down into low rates, you would find that you would get, as you're traveling faster, you would get smoother turns, things start flying a lot nicer. So that's why you'd want low rates. As the name implies, the rates get turned down. You don't have as much servo travel on low rates as you do on high rates. Okay, so now we are going to go back into this model, and we are going to look at how I set it up. I've set up, as I mentioned before, the switches have switch B has manual or no Expo, and then this switch B middle is high rates at 30%, and switch B low is low rates at 40%. So I've given it more Expo, and that's to coincide with the twitchiness of how things work. Now, all these things are subjective, and you can play with this. You might find that when you look at Expo, what you're looking at here, this is an Expo curve, and you can see that the curve gets flatter. So by when you don't touch the sticks, it sticks to the middle, right, for your right stick. So that controls elevator and it controls ailerons. So on the ailerons right here, you'd see that as you barely move the sticks, it doesn't it's not as responsive. It deadens the responsiveness around the center, but as you get closer to the ends, it gets a lot more responsive. Now, what happens is that we discussed this in the last episode where we were talking about setting endpoints, that there's a relationship between twitchiness and travel. If you have too much travel, you're going to have twitchiness. So that's where we set up rates. And what I've done on here is we go down to the same control surface. Once again, I have 100% rates because this is manual. In high rates, I've set rates to 85%. And in low rates, I set it to 70%. So there's less travel. Maybe it's still too much travel. Maybe you come in here at some point and you decide, you know what, I want to try this at 60%. Maybe this flies better at high speeds when travel is limited to 60%. And maybe instead of having Expo at 40%, I might want to take it down to 25%. And you can start playing with the relationship between rates and Expo because there's a relationship there. Now, what we can do also is we're going to look at elevator. And this one, this is no Expo and 25%. And maybe as you're going faster, you need, once again, a little more Expo. And you go down here, in the same situation, you've got lower rates the faster you go. And let's just say that, oh my gosh, this thing is feeling really twitchy. And I know the natural inclination is to come here and set this up to maybe 40%. And maybe that'll help out with the twitchiness of everything. But you might want to start off at 70% rates and bring it down to 60% and see if that takes care of the twitchiness before changing this. So when you start to get over 40% Expo, that means you have way too much travel in my book. I mean, some planes are just set up that way where they're just naturally twitchy and you just need a ton of Expo. But what I believe is that you're better off playing with the weights and rates. The whole thing about setting up planes, we have one guy who works for us named Jose, who is probably, I call him the plane whisperer, because you can hand him a plane and let him go fly it, and he will give it back to you, and the plane will fly better than you ever dreamed it could possibly fly, because he knows the intimate details of the plane, and he's all about the setup of the plane. He's all about the control rods are set up, but he spends a lot of time working on rates. This is his thing. And he really tries to limit the amount of travel and just give it just the appropriate amount of travel and no more for each situation. And he really understands planes. And so that's why this is super important. And last, I'm going to show you Rudder. Rudder tends to, in my book, you got to be careful with Rudder because a lot of times that's your tail wheel that you are turning, or nose wheel. And because you're turning it, you want as much throw as possible, even though you can limit things. What I tend to do is just give Expo of about 15%, see if that helps. I don't really find that the rudder gets twitchy. I don't have a lot of planes where it gets twitchy. Maybe there are some out there. I just haven't run across any. So I just give it just one value, and that's good for everything, including manual. And with that, we are done with this. I hope you have a great day, and we'll catch you on the next episode.